The glorification of startup culture, the glorification of Silicon Valley, and the glorification of long sleepless nights with caffeine. We regret all of this. Let us first define what we mean by startup culture. Startup culture refers to a set of values, behaviors, and practices associated with the creation and operation of a new, often technology-driven businesses. It is characterized by a focus on innovation, risk-taking, rapid growth, and distribution of established industries. While this culture has led to the creation of many successful companies and technological advancements like what happened with Apple and Microsoft, we believe that the negative impacts outweigh the positives. Just look at all those companies that failed. First of all, we on the side of the government believe that the glorification and widespread adoption of startup culture has resulted in significant social, economic, and psychological harms. While it is very important to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship, the current manifestation of startup culture has led to numerous regrettable outcomes. As the government first speaker, I would like to talk about our team's first argument, which is going to be unsustainable work ethic, and our team's second argument, which is going to be about high failure rates. Our third argument will be done by our second speaker. So now now I'll go on to my arguments. My first argument being the unsustainable work ethic. So, like I mentioned in my introduction, startup companies glorify overwork and the hustle culture. And hustle culture basically means you're expected to work long hours, straight up. So startup culture, especially those startup companies, often glorify working long hours as a badge of honor. The idea is that hustling or constantly grinding work is very necessary to succeed is very deeply ingrained in the company, and this can create an environment where the employees feel pressure to work beyond a standard 40-hour work week, often to the detriment of their personal lives. In the info slide, it mentions that during the startup period, many people working for business often work very, very, very hard for very little pay, which means that basically they work very hard, but they don't almost receive anything back, which means that this work hour, the unsustainable work ethic is really there. And also, because of the current with the rise of remote work and digital communication tools, there's an implicit expectation in many startup companies that employees should be available around the clock, and this obviously blurs the boundaries between your work and your personal life, making it difficult for workers in general to truly disconnect and recharge because the company is in its early stages and require as much attention as possible. Well, obviously, the glorification of overwork and the hustle culture results in a lot of downsides to the workers themselves. Now, let me tell you why. First of all, we believe that there's going to be an impact on the workers' mental health. Obviously, there's going to be a burnout because the workers are going to work like really hard. They're going to work like hours, but then the relentless pace and the pressure to perform can lead to a really big burnout, a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So burnout is particularly prevalent in startup environments where the stakes are high and the workload is intense, and also issues like constant stress, the lack of sleep, the pressure to meet high expectations can contribute to anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues amongst the workers, which we clearly do not want. And also, the stigma around discussing mental health in the workplace, especially in high-pressure startup environments, can exacerbate these problems to the point where their mental health is going to be uncurable. We also think there's going to be a lot of physical health consequences as well in these startup companies. Well, obviously, working a lot in your chair, staring around your computer screen isn't very good for your health. Obviously, there's going to be eye strain. If you work long hours staring at your computer, just typing constantly, then you're going to have an eye strain, which might lead to reduced eyesight. And also, sitting in a chair for long hours straight with no standing up and etc. may lead to you to have a curved back or a turtleneck, like what people have in companies. And this is only the beginning. It can also be associated with numerous health risks, including obesity, cardiovascular disease, and musculoskeletal problems as well. And another physical health consequence that is often neglected is the sleep deprivation. Obviously, these startup companies have an emphasis on working late into the night or waking up early to get ahead, and this can lead to chronic self-deprivation. The lack of sleep is linked to a range of health issues, including weakened immune function, cognitive impairments, and an increased risk of chronic conditions like diabetes and heart disease, and much more. Obviously, we do not want this as well. We want our workers to be healthy. But it's not only about the workers. It's going to reduce it's going to have a negative impact on the productivity as well, something we also do not really want. Obviously, because you're overworking the workers are going to get burned out, which means that there's going to be diminishing returns, which means that because the workers are too overworked, they feel tired, and that's why there's going to be a negative impact on productivity. And also, most people don't know this, but there's also going to be a unrealistic expectation and pressure on the founders of the company as well. The startup founders face in particular enormous pressure to succeed, often feeling the weight of their investors' expectations, the responsibility for their employees' livelihoods, and the desire to bring their vision to life. However, if they fail, all these expectations go straight down on them, which isn't very good for their mental health and their physical health as well. Our second argument is going to be the high failure rates. Microsoft, yeah. Apple, yeah. They succeeded. But there are thousands of startup companies that fail every single year, and these result in a lot of negative impacts. So the first is loss of capital. Investors in failed startups can lose significant amount of money, in particular in cases where they invested heavily in the early stage companies. So this is a really important issue. If you invest in a lot of companies and if they fail, you don't get your money back, which means that the investors will lose money even if they didn't like directly work in the company as well. And also there's going to be debt and bankruptcy for the company starter. This is very obvious. If the company fails, then the company is screwed. They don't have any way to earn the money. That's why the owner takes full responsibility and thus goes into debt and bankruptcy. And also, there's going to be an economic impact where the startup companies had significant power over. For example, if a certain community all worked in that startup company, then obviously if that startup company fails, then everyone in the community goes jobless, which isn't something we want as well. Also, there's going to be an impact on the employees. Lastly, the employees of the startup companies can face sudden unemployment often without severance or adequate notice. This can be especially challenging for those who just joined a startup for the promise of equity or future growth opportunities, only to see those prospects vanish. So obviously, startup companies have an unsustainable work ethic. It ruins the workers that work there and the founders as well. And obviously, if they fail, like many of them do, then the worker, the founder, and everyone invested in it is hit severely. That's why we stand to strongly oppose startup culture. Thank you very much.
Okay, firstly, we win this debate if we can prove to you how the world without a startup business would have more negative impacts than positive, and if our impacts have more important benefits than theirs. Okay, firstly, let's start with the rebuttal. The opening government said, firstly, there will be a glorified and overworking. This would lead to sacrificing large companies, and this would mean like many companies would fail after long hours of work. Okay, if many people didn't glorify this, the people that are going through all these large pay would be going through a lot of stress already, and many people giving them public backlash because they're doing this is not great. Also, they said they will have lots of health impacts. Firstly, they're picking very rare things that will happen in this startup business, and there are many other workers that have to work many shifts, have to work several jobs, and have to go through way worse, harsh conditions than them. There are also many other different severe and many other possible ways on how you could get these injuries. This is picking all the negative small impacts compared to all these large companies such as Microsoft and Google failing. They also stated that if you fail in a startup company, all the people will lose their job and they'll go to financial debt. Okay, firstly, this is over exaggerating. And secondly, they could easily try again, look for another job, or they could most people that sign up for like startup businesses already have like a bit of financial credit. They are not that poor because they are willing to risk their things to try startup for these businesses. Also, people that are trying to do startup businesses also know what they're doing. They know that they're going to fail if they try and then they fail. They also know they're going to lose their job, but they're going for this because if without startup businesses, what our world would look like is a world where not many people have access to resources because Microsoft and Google didn't exist. There'll also be a world where people are going through the people that are going through startup businesses also know what they're signing up for, and they know that if they lose the job, they also have backup plans or know what they're going to do as they're going to keep on trying again until they get this thing working. Okay, I'll now begin my counterfactual. What would the world look like if there were large businesses like Microsoft because of these things. Firstly, to have a large successful business, you're going to have to work tirelessly. To make a large business work and to make it successful, you're going to have to work for long hours because it's not easy for a company and to make a large company. Also, people that are working already really hard to maintain this company, they're already going through immense pressure. They're already going through lots of pressure and they might go through financial debt. They already are going through all these things. And if without wanting to start a business, lots of people might give them negative credit. Lots of people might give them even more pressure and more negative comments. What we should be doing is encouraging this. The government should be encouraging more startup businesses, more things. Because if we discourage this, people are already not that motivated to do this because they have to go through hard work. And if we keep on discouraging them, all these things wouldn't all these large businesses would disappear if this didn't happen. So therefore, the government should keep on trying to encourage them to work harder, to keep on trying for these startup businesses to go and work, to make them more successful. I'll now begin my first point on how no successful businesses or successful companies just like got there without much work or without much effort. Large startup companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, all had to start with nothing. Every business all started with nothing and they had to build themselves up. They had to build themselves up, and to get it's mandatory to work really hard if you want a successful business. If you don't work hard, it's like same as studying. If you want a good exam result, even though you might have talent or stuff, you're still going to have to continuously work hard to get the result that you want. You're going to keep on having to work hard or try, and you'll have to make something really unique, as there are already many companies, and a world without this mean that Microsoft, Apple, and these things won't appear. And all of these people, everyone in the world that uses Microsoft, everyone in the world that uses Apple or Microsoft, Apple would be discouraged. Everyone would not get as much information, and everyone would be in lack of resources because there won't be any company that's willing to go through all this effort to go and make this startup business. Okay, second point. They also won't teach companies to be innovative and try hard. If the people that actually want to do this is because they really want to try hard, and if the government keeps on demotivating them, they're already not as motivated, and if they keep on doing it, they would have a very low self-esteem. Therefore, many startup companies would therefore not happen, and many the one with this means that people won't be as innovative and try as hard. The companies won't be as unique. They won't be as beneficial to humankind. I'll now begin my third point. Okay, what is a world without a startup business with large companies such as Microsoft? Firstly, it has a harm on the economy. Why does it have a harm on the economy? Because if all these people, all these large companies would not exist, meaning that the government doesn't get any money from these apps or these large companies. Secondly, it would have massive job loss because all of these people that work in JB Hi-Fi, all these people that work for Microsoft or sell these equipment and work for Apple and these will lose their jobs immediately. This is more job loss than the people that are going through startup businesses. They would also have to be very dependent on the fact that this business will still be able to stand up and still be able to continue. Because of this, we also went on the metrics of things such as scope. We went on scope because if these startup businesses didn't exist, we actually impact more people because everyone in the world that uses these companies is more than the people that are trying for startup businesses. It's more than the people that are injuring themselves. There's more people injuring themselves and many other things than injuring themselves in startup businesses. We also have lots more people needing these websites compared to these people that don't. We also have massive job loss compared to the other world. In our world, we have job loss for everyone that goes through these works for these large companies. In their world, they only have job loss for these people that might fail in their startup businesses because this might be because they didn't try as hard and didn't put as much effort as the others. And because of these reasons, I'm proud to oppose.
I'm going to go ahead and explain exactly why, even on their points, we completely win this case and why I believe that open government will take the debate home today. Now, Judge, they tell us the fact that this kind of negative work culture already pre-exists in the status quo in large companies. And they also tell us the fact that there is already stress and mental problems already in the status quo, and that these kinds of problems which we mentioned, which my first speaker mentions, is not significant for that exact reason. But Judge, I ask you exactly why then should we want actually another source of that stress, of those problems? What side opposition is exactly telling you is that, hey, these problems already exist in the status quo, but what we want inside opposition is to preserve the extra source of these problems. We want more of these problems to exist. Judge, obviously you don't want more back pains, more mental problems, more and more individuals who are suffering psychologically. You want less people suffering psychologically, which ultimately means even on that rebuttal, which they give to us for our first argument, and I don't understand why that's even a refutation, but we ultimately win over them because we benefit the majority, because we benefit more individuals by lessening their burden, by lessening burden for more individuals. Now, the second refutation which they bring up for the second argument is about how negative work culture already pre-exists in the status quo in large companies. But Judge, again, we ask you, then why would you want more individuals suffering on the startup companies, and especially in startup companies? Because startup companies have a unique situation in which the workers are significantly more burdened than larger companies. And that point I will address in a little bit in my third argument, which will be on exactly how these individuals, when they are released from these startup companies due to the failure of the startup company, will not be able to easily find another job, and ultimately will be significantly negatively impacted for their future career prospects, and how ultimately their entire life may be destroyed. Now, Judge, there are 2 points of major analysis which they bring up here. First, the first layer of analysis is the question of what boosts innovation. And they tell us the fact that it is competition, because these startups, they will be strive to innovate because of the competition. Now, of course, they don't specifically state there's competition, but we assume it must be competition because ultimately the reason why these startups have to work so hard is because they are startups, new companies, new faces in an ever-emerging market where they must work hard to make themselves stand out. So that's obviously why that work culture exists in the first place, and that is why there's actually that innovation, right? But ultimately, we tell you the fact that that is already pre-existing in the status quo with ultimately larger companies. Why is this so? That the fact that Apple and Samsung are competing constantly, and regardless of whether or not there are new startup companies emerging in that status quo, and they're constantly emerging in competition with each other. We tell the fact that competition, because it already exists in the status quo with larger companies, we don't need startup companies and for that matter, more individuals suffering in these startup companies because of the glorification of startup culture to have to suffer for the little chance, 10% chance of actually making it big and becoming a gigantic conglomerate like Apple, like Amazon, like Microsoft. And we tell the fact that because the market already has this innovation, we don't need startups specifically to have that bring that innovation for us, meaning that we as a society will still advance even if startup culture is glorified, even if we regret startup culture. So ultimately, we win on that clash. Now, the second clash which they bring up is about the economy. They tell us the fact that the economy will be negatively impacted because ultimately, if you don't have these startup companies, you don't have anyone influence actually sparking the market. And on top of that, you'll have more and more layoffs from the individuals who don't try in these startup companies. Judge, note the fact that what we are regretting in this motion is we are regretting the glorification and the idea of startup culture, in so as where we regret the idea of startup culture in and of itself, meaning we regret the glorification of this Silicon Valley, of that dream, of that idea that people, because that idea is 100% possible, 100% likely that it will 100% succeed, that people will force themselves to suffer under that burden and face the massive risks associated with that burden. And we tell you the fact that we regret these because not only does it not bring any no significant degree of innovation, but it also does not significantly impact the economy because you will still have jobs for these people, because these larger corporations, if they are that large, they still are running short on time, because according to opposition's analysis of these larger companies, because they have so much work to do, then ultimately they'll always have new jobs for these individuals. And even if that is not the case, you still will have, because there's so many large corporations in the world, you will still have at least 1 or 2 jobs for these individuals. And even if that may not be true, even inside opposition side of the case, you will still have jobless people because there's a large amount of these startup companies ultimately failing. Now, Judge, let me tell you exactly why this is so, and if they fail in these startup companies, why this will be detrimental to them. Now, there are 3 primary layers of analysis which I'll lay on here. One being job loss and financial instability. The second being impact on career trajectory. 3, the psychological and emotional effects on them due to the loss of the startup. And also why this startup failure is more likely in majority of cases to happen than startup success. Now, I'm going to address the first point, the last point first, so I can prove to you through mechanization exactly why this is the case. Now, note the fact that statistics show that ultimately 90% of startups fail, and the reason why this is so is because, as I mentioned before, the market is ultimately always changing. Startup companies ultimately fail in the majority of cases because they fail to raise capital, they run out of cash, and on top of that, they also need to adapt to the market. They often have a lack of product market fit. They have inadequate marketing strategy and insufficient funding. They often also fail to make themselves stand out in the market, in the ever-changing market, because ultimately that market is not only has one startup company, which is a new face in the town on the block. You have tens of thousands of startup companies on the block, and out of those tens of thousands, you'll have one which succeeds, and that might be Microsoft, next Apple, whatever. But what about the other 999,999 other startup companies which ultimately fail? What happens to these employees even after they put in all this effort, after all this mental suffering? What do they get? Guess what? Nothing. Zip, zilch. But who knows? They might have a backup plan, like side opposition suggests. But this is simply untrue. Why is this so? Employees who actually face sudden job loss leave them without benefits and income, such as health insurance and retirement plans. And this can also lead to immediate financial instability and stress. And obviously, even if they have a backup plan, they still need to get that new job. And during that period, they will face significant financial instability. Now, that is if we're being generous. Now, in a competitive job market, former startup company employees will find it ultimately challenging to secure new employment, especially if the failure of the startup is perceived negatively by potential employers. And why will this be so? Because employers will view candidates from failed startups as risky hires, because they're going to question the decision-making or ability to deliver results, because the company that they worked so hard on ultimately ended up failing. And because they have that idea of the startup culture in their minds, they're ultimately not going to hire these individuals, which ultimately means that these individuals who are from these startup companies who ultimately end up failing, because the startup company fails, because it's more likely for them to fail, obviously. It's not the startup company's fault. It all just ultimately ends up happening. It's just a part of life, right? These individuals will ultimately have to ruin their lives because of the entire idea of startup culture, not only because the startup culture influences the employers and causes them not to employ these individuals who are coming out of these startup companies who need a job, severely need a job, but also because these startup company employees ultimately choose to go to that startup company in the first place, choose to go to that financial suicide because they believe in the glorification of startup culture. They believe that their company could potentially become a large conglomerate like Apple, regardless of the fact that it is a very low possibility. So, Judge, we are very proud to propose, and we believe that we take home the debate today. Thank you.
Judge, we have established that a world without startup companies is a world without technical innovations and search engines such as Google and Microsoft, or even like Apple and Samsung providing like mobile phones for the entire population. In this world, in the status quo, the people rely on these websites and big companies for research and studying and writing historical books. And a world without this would be implausible to the average human being. Like if you ask a random person on the street, would you like to live in a world without Google, without Microsoft, without any search engines? What would they say? They will obviously say, no, search engines like are so helpful. They're such like a helpful thing in terms of research and studying that like a world without it would be like a monstrosity. And yet Team Proposition still believes that they should sacrifice all these technological advancements and that we should prefer a world without it, just for a small minority of people who detriment from this, though they completely disregard that the negatively impacted stakeholder probably already has wealth before they risk their wealth in the startup company, and they can simply find another job after and recover from this financial loss slowly. There will be two pieces. There will be two main pieces in this speech: rebuttal and blame. So first, onto rebuttal. The Prime Minister states that unemployment is going to be a huge problem because there's going to be many companies that fail, right, and only some that excel. However, my leader of opposition has already characterized these risk takers as people who are already wealthy, otherwise they wouldn't take the risk. Even under the societal norm that startup companies is good, you'll get successful, people with let's just say the average person still wouldn't try to start a business because the cognitive ability of a human will obviously just tell them that it's foolish to try start a company if you don't have any backup. Why would the average human do this? No, obviously they have some inherited wealth or wealth from another job that they do as well, and that's why they only take this risk if they know they can recover from it. which is why we believe their point doesn't stand. And even if our characterization was wrong, do you seriously think that the people is more important, that these few hundred or thousand people is more important than the benefit of the entire population? They suggest that the happiness of a few thousand people is so important that Apple, Microsoft, Kohl's, Woolworths, and Google should just like get shut down for these people. Yes.
Are you suggesting that if this motion is not passed, you'll just remove things like Microsoft and Apple, and like it, and is that how you interpret the motion?
No, we're saying that like this is a regret motion, right? So you're regretting this world and like proposing a world where like these startup companies isn't there, which means that like a world without these companies, and ultimately we believe that these companies actually like do more good than harm, and like that the scope they impact is like more than like the few hundred that's like detrimented from this. And number two, health, which the Prime Minister also mentions. And we believe that like people who start a company has to take like the factors of health in mind. They should understand that there are innumerable health detriments that can appear because they are doing this. But since they have the freedom of choice to do this, since they want to start the company, they sacrifice their health for this. And furthermore, just like my first piece of rebuttal on how like you guys are trying to sacrifice all these big companies for like in a world without all these big companies, just for the happiness of a few people. For health, it's the exact same. Why would you want like all these big companies to go away just so that like a few people, a small minority, can have a happy lifestyle? And also like when they mentioned neck and spine problems, we don't believe that it's actually going to be that serious to the point where they have neck and spine problems, right? And then they need to do like surgeries and that will like last with them for their entire life. We believe that like this is like a far-fetched example of what can happen. And now onto like economy. They say that like 999,999 companies will fail, and like only Google and Microsoft will succeed. But like we don't think that there's actually this many people trying to like go to for a startup company, because just think about it, like the most of the world is like in a low SES like socioeconomic status, and because of this like most of the people won't want to start up this company because they know they don't have the financial funds to start it, and also that they can't have backup if they fail. We believe that only a small portion of that population actually thinks about this, and like maybe like not even like as much as they say. And because of this, I will now move on to my way. And we believe that we win on the metric of scope, as Microsoft, Apple, Google, they all like impact the entire world. Like everyone across the world probably like uses Google, uses Microsoft for their research, for their studying in school. And like also it can help them in like serious times. Like for example, if they're injured, Google can like help them understand how to like treat the injury, like first aid. And we believe that they lose on scope because they only impact a slight amount of people who try to start these companies up. And like these small amount of people they suggest will have financial stress and health detriments. However, I already rebutted this, and I was being extremely charitable, playing on like their land, like disregarding the entire characteristic, the characterization of the wealthy. And because of these reasons, we believe that the debate should go to opening opposition. Thank you.
What we'd like to establish in this debate is completely opposite to what the other side have claimed, that companies like Apple and Google or Microsoft have just suddenly become eradicated and taken off the map, and like just and all the influence is brought isn't good. However, what we believe is that the establishment of these companies is very positive for the market. However, what we don't want is like 5 million new companies a year, all of them like almost none of them having potential to actually invent something new and bring something new to the market. And what we have today is like like 5 or 6 million newcomers in the world. And just think about the last time you heard about a new company, right? You probably don't even know how many companies how many a new about a new company, because almost all the time they never succeed. And I feel that while startup businesses exist on either side of the debate, we believe that it's only the most confident and most successful entrepreneurs who should try to start out a business. And we don't have and not having the problem of not succeeding because they're the most confident, the most qualified, and the most with the most research going on. We don't want 5 million businesses every year that almost none of them actually make an impact. And we believe that
They all right.
no, that whilst all the research and the ingenuity from these new startup companies can be used from these big companies such as Apple, and they can continue to research and continue to use their vast resources to create a better society, create more technological advances. We don't want just random college dropouts. Like 4 million out of the 5 million probably don't know what they're doing, and like 4 million college dropouts from dropping out from a perfectly good school and thinking they can reinvent the wheel. All right, they most of them don't do anything, and most of them don't
Oh,
actually achieve what they want to do. Our opening half have said that talked about all the negatives about on the actual people who these idealized young people who want to succeed by working very hard. However, and talking about the negatives on them, we also believe that we also believe that businesses are there's far too many business startup businesses that exist, and we think that if there's 5 million businesses occurring every year, we're missing out on these people who can work in necessary workforces like nurses, doctors, like policemen, right? We don't have enough of those people, and we have far too many businesses who are just trying to win the lottery by starting a new company that almost never succeeds. We believe that not what the opposition falsely characterized is, that like, oh, like Apple and Microsoft, let's just remove all the benefits that they brought. What we believe is that there should be far less people nowadays, and and from now on, such that a lot less people try to just start new businesses without the necessary business plan and without the necessary research and funding to start businesses. We believe that the ingenuity from all these big companies like Apple and Microsoft can continue to improve society with those technological advancements, instead of just people who are not as good, don't have as many resources, trying to start their companies, and while they can gain just perfectly good jobs for more pay in other places, is a Hollywood idealized like news stories about people just making it gives them a false interpretation of actually what they have to do, and provides a significantly worse future for all the people involved in a new company. And if they have the funding to start a new company, that probably won't do much for them. They definitely have enough resources and enough training to gain a job that's more stable and provides far significantly less pressure on the people. And we believe that the that people who engage in these workforces should be significantly reduced. And these companies, like in the status quo, these companies, there are so many companies who've already monopolized their market, like maybe two or three companies you can think about that have just absolutely dominated their market, and any development of new companies will just be quickly eradicated, even if they have better ideas, even if they are more inspired and willing to work harder, they just won't succeed because of the monopolization of these companies that have been established since like 10 years. So it's very unlikely that anyone will succeed, and therefore these people with the genius ideas, with the new ingenuity skills, can work in high-paying jobs at Apple or Microsoft to improve society, improve the ingenuity of the world. However, they don't have the necessary, like they just don't have the money to succeed on their side. We feel that relying on the hopes of winning the lottery by actually making a good company is just far too unrealistic, and the newcomers who try and navigate around like huge companies that have monopolized the situation makes it almost impossible for like just startup businesses to actually become profitable. And we believe that even if you can make a profit, you can make a significantly better difference working for previously established companies that can continue to inspire, continue to bring new technologies. Judge, just think about the toil and the work put in by all these people who've been projected this false image of a golden, a silver lining at the end of the rain, like the cloud, but there isn't. And people have just been falsely casted this image of success when most likely failure is going to happen. Thank you.
In the opposition's world, there are several people who disagree with the notion of a startup culture, despite the benefits that it can give people if the company is successful, and also despite the fact that workers get a more enjoyable experience working for the startup company. Before I move on to my first substantive, I would like to present my rebuttal. The opposition has stated that if you are constantly typing in your job, your eyesight can deteriorate, and like in startup companies, some people are forced to like sit down for hours, and which can have like a bad health impact on them. However, they are still granted sleep, and some startup companies allow flexibility in their workers' schedule. If a company were also to be found mistreating their workers and for actually forcing them to sit there the entire day, they would also get a bad reputation, which also means that their product or the new innovation they create has a lower chance of being able to be successful. Most companies are not willing to take this risk, and even if the info slide may state that they work very hard for little pay, this doesn't necessarily mean that companies just disregard health issues that their workers face. They've also stated that the company can fail and the owner will have to take full responsibility. However, if the company does fail, they are required to provide for the workers, meaning that those workers probably won't fall into a situation of poverty. And you have also stated that the owner will take full responsibility, meaning that the worker isn't responsible for what happens, and also proves the fact that they'll be given credit and also their unpaid wages when the company fails. Large companies can also fail as well, and which also results in more job loss. They've also stated that they are benefiting more people. This isn't necessarily true, as startup companies don't even have that many workers. And in the government's world, they are prohibiting new ideas from startup companies, which can disadvantage many people, including those who just want to start a company because like to spread their new innovation in the world. And they've also stated that startup companies do not bring a significant degree of innovation. However, startup companies are more willing to test new innovations, and most large companies which have created important innovations first started being a startup company. They've also stated that startup companies fail in the majority of cases, and workers are not able to do anything. However, in the case that they still provide innovation to our world. As we have also stated previously, companies will be forced to provide some sort of financial support for these workers and give them the unpaid salary that they were promised, meaning that they probably won't fall into a situation of poverty where they aren't able to feed themselves. And they've also stated that the development of new companies will be quickly eradicated. This isn't necessarily true, as these startup companies will find a way to get their innovation through. And if their innovation were to be something new, they wouldn't be under much control of the larger companies. This innovation that they create is probably also extremely important, meaning that larger companies will have to think before eradicating the new companies and think about the reputation that they will get for like seizing for like
Point?
Yes.
Oh, so you mentioned the fact that these startup companies, even if they do disappear, they're at least contributing some kind of innovations. And you mentioned the fact that these large companies are eradicating these small companies. But then in that case, then why don't the small startup companies still pre-exist today? Why did they end up disappearing? Because they are contributing so much, aren't they?
I wasn't like stating that that they would be quickly eradicated. I was like I was trying to present a rebuttal to the other team that said that the development of of these startup companies would be quickly eradicated. Well, I'm going to move on. This innovation is also extremely important, meaning that larger companies would have to think before eradicating the new companies. Large companies don't necessarily have full control over smaller companies which create new innovations as well, meaning that they probably won't be likely eradicated if they create something new that is extremely important. I believe we have one on the metric of scope because there are several startup companies, and without all these startup companies creating innovations and turning into larger companies, and people who desperately need easy to earn jobs who then turn to start these startup companies, compared to our side where startup companies create several new innovations so that society can advance further, and they also are able to provide jobs to people who do not have any jobs, and reassure them that if the company does fail, they will be provided financial assistance. I would now like to move on to my first substantive, that startup companies are more willing to try out innovations as they aren't that famous yet, and they are able to take this risk as they haven't invested that much in their company. New innovations are extremely important and crucial to our world. Take Microsoft, for example. They were once a startup company, and because of the fact that they took the risk to create their laptops and also applications, this has greatly benefited many people and also their company. Innovations are extremely important to our world, including sustainable innovation that startup companies may decide to create. Without these startup companies and people working for these companies, these innovations wouldn't have been made in the first place. This proves that startup companies are extremely beneficial to us due to helpful innovations, which can also involve medical innovations for the medical world, space innovations, and new technologies. If we take a look at the medical innovations, this can greatly improve the medical world, helping those who have incurable diseases to finally be given a cure. Space innovations can help us discover more about the world around us and crucial information that we may need to know. Even if some startup companies may not be focused on these important innovations and may fail, even if some startup companies may not be focused on these important innovations but are more focused on products, this can also benefit our world. Even if some startup companies may fail, there will still be these other startup companies that are able to be successful and help our society. Without startup companies, we wouldn't be able to have successful companies, as all companies have to have a starting point. I would now like to move on to my second substantive, that workers' ideas directly contribute to their company. In some companies, workers may work extremely hard to contribute to their company, providing plans for what the company can do next, what steps they can do to ensure their success, and more. With these startup companies, workers' ideas are most likely to actually have an impact, as startup companies are desperately in need of ideas. This can ensure that the workers actually feel that they can do something for company rather than their ideas being dismissed in other companies based on their position. This means that startup companies are able to treat their workers with more justice and equality compared to larger companies. Larger companies, however, have more workers, so not all ideas are heard and not all ideas are given equal attention to compared to startup companies. In conclusion, we should not regret startup companies, as startup companies provide us with useful innovations, and because workers' ideas are able to be heard through startup companies. Therefore, I'm proud to negate.
So, as the government whip in my speeches, I'm going to first provide a refutation to the other side, the member of the oppositions, and then I'm going to summarize this debate with two questions. So, but first, let's come to my refutation. So, first, she made the argument that in the startup companies, they are more willing to try out innovations. But I'll say, first, I doubt if this is actually true, because many startup companies actually don't have that ability to do so. For example, she had mentioned space and medical innovations. I will say yes, these innovations are very important, but do they really think that startup companies have the ability to do so? Do they really know how expensive space exploration or medical or innovations are? I mean, they are. I mean, it's really kind of impossible for someone who had just started up to invest in those innovations simply because it's too hard to do so. And secondly, even though some innovative companies they kind of have this technology, or at least they have this idea, it's very it is kind of very unlikely for them to survive. And why is that? I think my partner has already established or had already tell us why it is really hard for a startup company actually to succeed and to become a real established good company. And so but the problem is when they failed, I'll say it's the truth is they probably end up with like nothing. And I'm going to further explain this in my summary of the whole debate round. And secondly, they've said the workers can give more. The voice of the workers can be easily heard in startup companies, maybe because they're desperate of ideas, maybe because there are less people. But first, I don't think this is always true, because in some companies it's just happened. It's like they have like 3 or 4 founders, or it's basically founded by a family and an individual, and then all of the other people are just workers. So basically there are only a boss and workers. So there actually are no zone for promotion, because there are always such a strict line between the founder and the workers themselves. So I really doubt whether the founder will listen to the workers that much as you think. And also, even though sometimes, yes, workers, maybe they think they can be easily hurt, but at the same time, they also have to take the risk of like maybe their company got bankrupt. Maybe they're just easy to lose their job, because it's very likely that a startup company get bankrupt. So actually, I would doubt how many individual would think that getting hurt is more important than having a job. So actually, I don't think this point matters so much, even though it might sometimes in some situations be true. So and then I'm going to summarize this in 2 simple questions. The first question is, what is the problem of this startup culture, or what is the problem of this narrative especially? So this means that, as my partner has said, we're not opposing every startup as a whole, but we're opposing this startup culture, which is actually a narrative or we can call it a propaganda. So basically, first it is pushing people into taking risks. So actually, I think this startup culture is a great example of what is called survivor bias. So basically, what people would see is those successful entrepreneurs, but what they won't see is thousands and millions of those who failed. And this is what a point my partner and also the front half have already mentioned. So actually, the real dangerous this is that it actually pushes people to make irrational choice. When people choose to do a startup company because they're impacted by this startup culture, are they really making such a rational choice as oppositions had suggested? Well, I think not so much, because it just sound weird, right? And sometimes people just got out of school, maybe they're actually unprepared, because all those successful stories haven't tell them so much about the difficulties they'll face, and it doesn't really tell them about what they are going to face if they failed. So actually, they start off with some kind of ideal or believing that they're the one who choose the right path, they're the one who's somehow sure to success. But actually, when they really set up companies, they'll soon found out that it's not like what they've imagined. They'll have their dream devastated and many of them end up losing their money and their guns and left with despair. And the second problem is that it normalizes or rationalizes the difficulties of the employees, or at least it could be used as like entrepreneurs to do so. So for example, like it has said in the info page, sometimes it is usual to get a little salary during this startup stage, which is actually I would say, it's a brainwash to our employees, because they're kind of first giving them a kind of unachievable or actually unrelated fantasy for them, while even attracting people into those unreliable small companies, because they label themselves as startups. But actually, employees should be treated with like proper treatment instead of working over hours. So all of these might lead to mental health problems or all kind of problems. So, and I'll say it is a general picture, because it is a problem in the narrative itself, it's the nature of it. And the second problem is what is the benefit of startup culture? Like the opposition is considering as a perspective of the whole society. It is saying that it encourages positive qualities such as innovation and hard work and maybe economic growth. But I would say maybe in some extent it's true. But the oppositions fail to notice that all of these have a premise is that the company did succeed. So suppose that Apple go bankrupt in the first few years, who would say that you're being so innovative, you're being so hardworking? Because no one was going to say that, because it's what they're
so-called innovation is becoming meaningless. The products are disappearing, and so they basically don't make such a big differences. And now the problem is what is the probability of succeed? It's not so high, right? Like my partner has already proved. And also, so I would say this benefit, it do exist, but first, it is not so influential and not on such a large scale as it seems to be, or as the opposition seems to prove. But however, it requires the satisfaction of, or is kind of sacrifice thousands or even millions of individuals is protected time, sorry. And also those individuals and their failures are not even mentioned. They're just wiped out of this narrative. So this false narrative, this trap of survivor bias can just continue. So this is all my speech. Thank you, Judge.
Two questions I've identified in this debate. First on health risks, and then on the success of startup companies. So on health risk, opposition has just been talking about sleep deprivation, strains and unhealthiness, and they say that there's going to be a reduce on productivity, the workers are going to be tired, and there's an unrealistic expectation. I believe that opposition is simply like exaggerating this claim, and it's not like these people would be like severely harmed as a health risk. And also they stated that there'll be like they've also stated that because there are significant health risks, this means that productivity would be lowered. There will be not a successful business, and that harms like the economy with no startup businesses. So I'd like to just rebut the point on like no. I'd just like to explain the health risk point and add on to why we win the health risk point. So first of all, we've been talking about in health risks on how how like we are willing to start out new innovations. We are not like forcing them to go into like lots of trouble and productivity, the opposition states we have, because we're not forcing them. We're just simply just telling them to work hard, and hopefully the people that work hard will pay off. And in fact, we believe that in their road, there will actually be more health risks, because in their road, there will be like in their road, the health risk is great due to the fact that they're basically saying, oh my God, they're basically saying how, oh my God, they're basically saying how there will be these new jobs. No, thank you. Oh wait, scrap that part. I'll just like restart this. Just what I said just then. So basically in their road there will be more health risks, because in their road they will have to work harder than ever, because they're not a startup company. They have money already. So they have to work hard to maintain their company, because there are new startup companies that are working twice as hard as they are. So that means that there's going to be, well, not as twice as hard, but they're working more productively, because they are smart people and they're the ones who are opening the startup businesses. And most of them are smart people who because they are opening startup businesses, they're confident that they're going to succeed, and they probably will. And also this means that the other people will have to be more productive. This is extremely unfair to oh my God. This is extremely unfair. And this is also why opposition has a more significant health risk than us. So I believe that we have won the health risks and by proving how there is more health risks in there is more health risks in opposition road, when they have to like work hard to compete with these other people. And furthermore, the impact of this health point is that sorry for my crappy speech, I got distracted. Furthermore, the impact of these like health risks is that the opposition toward is burdened harder, and that's why startup businesses are much more beneficial than like those businesses who are not starting up. And furthermore, the next clash on the successfulness of startup companies. So startup companies, as our first speaker stated, they are more willing to risk innovations instead. And opposition has just said that like 90% of people who like start up companies will be the ones who are most likely to fail. And I would just like to say that these companies are smart and productive, so they can easily find new jobs if they are able to like make like a startup company. And furthermore, uh uh we believe that we have won this clash because we believe that having startup companies who are willing to risk innovations, this is such a big like point and such a big like idea that it impacts because there will be important innovations so large that even though a minority of startup companies get through, it is beneficial for our world because who knows what might be invented in the future. And this 10% could invent new and wondrous things as technology keeps evolving. And this couldn't happen with businesses that already happen who have to work hard. These people who are using like startup countries, they're the ones who are more likely to be smarter. They're the ones who are more likely to make new innovations. And we see this clash to be the most important in this debate. Why is this the case? This is because our world is constantly evolving, and in order to have like in order to have like the best road and the possible long-term benefit that we could, this clash is able to provide so, and this and yeah. And so because of that, I believe we have won this clash too, as we have said that startup companies are more willing to risk innovations, and we have proven why it's true through that they are like Microsoft, they are willing to risk innovations in order to create a bigger profit because they're smart and productive, and this ultimately leads to why I believe we have won the debate. So proud to negate. Thank you.